Mary Lynn will introduce them in a little bit once we get the record button hit.
You guys look like you had a really good time.
What does that mean?
What's that mean, Heather?
I've been listening in, and it sounds like you guys are having a good time here.
We're having
We're just royal watching, you know us.
Yeah, it sounds like it's been fun. I'm just gonna put my little, over there.
There's the
It's a little hard to see.
It's
a little hard to see.
Bay.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's a long ways away from here.
The magic of the internet.
And since we're 3:45, we're now recording. I'm going to just mute myself, but I'll be here in the background if you need anything.
Thank you, Rod.
Thanks, Rod. So we'll flip over to our slide deck here shortly. And we're gonna.
That is not our slide deck.
That's not our slide deck, but it's coming soon. All right.
There we go. So everybody who's out there using the same tools you were just using, you can use a stamp, or you can just draw a little check mark or a circle. We'd like you to have a look at the three sort of statements about subitizing. So when it comes to understanding and teaching subitizing, which comment best describes you? So in the red or pink, I don't understand subitizing. In the yellow, I understand what subitizing is, but I'd like to know more. And then in the green, high five, I rock this. So if you could do that for us, we've got some comments coming in. We've got a few that can rock it, a few that would like to know a little bit more, and some that don't understand it yet at all, which is great. This gives Heather, it gives us a chance to kind of know where everybody sits, and Heather a chance also to see where everybody is while she's presenting and speaking to everybody.
I feel like in subitizing, especially within the early years, like we were looking in the old, well, it is old now, I guess, or at least it's dated, the elect document.
Yep.
For early years. Is that like, is the word subitizing in there, Jen?
It's not. I double checked, and I even had the chance to connect with a new graduate.
Yeah.
And I said, so have you heard the word subitizing? And she said,
What
what
is that? Yeah.
So she's taking it back to her center the very next day to
Wow.
sound very intelligent,
Yeah.
but it's not in there.
So what is number? What is subitizing? Two different types of subitizing. Who knew? I
That
thought
was new learning for
that
me.
was new learning for me. So subitizing, I've known the word for a little while, but I didn't know that there were two types, but once Heather explains it, it'll make sense. And what educators can do during subitizing exercises to help students, which will be really, I think you're really going to look forward to hearing those ideas, and activities you can do to generate subitizing in your daycare settings or classrooms. This is.
So we're going to archive all of our sessions. So we're going to record things. We are recording things. And Rod's doing that. But what's going to happen is at the end of the time, you can go to our blog at LKDSB.blogspot.com. You'll be able to check out a recording of this. You'll see there'll be a video recording of the session. You can see it's already there, ready to go. You just got to put the link in. But also then you can share that with somebody else. We welcome that warmly. And also, and if you miss another session, you could also go and then pick up another one if you don't get there to see it kind of face to face this time. We think this learning is too valuable to just have a moment and gone into the wind. So it's really important that we capture this learning and thinking, and then that we share that with each other and share it widely and openly. So we're really thankful for Heather to be willing to do that, but also Jen and Mary Lynn to be so willing to share so freely.
Go for it, man.
So, first of all, Jen Gardner, you can see her Bitmoji now, boom. Mary Lynn Anderson, Ben Hazard, that's who we are. We're from Lambton, Kent. Jen Gardner is a registered ECE, boom. Mary Lynn Anderson is our system coordinator for student achievement in elementary. I get to work with the program as a superintendent, and we are so thrilled to have Heather work. And there she is. Hello, Heather.
Hello, how's it going?
I feel like we're playing match the faces with the icons on the
Yep.
screen, and so far it's working.
Mine's a lot easier, actually.
That's right. Much more realistic.
It, it's a good artist.
It's a good art. Heather Warwick comes to us from Lakehead University in Thunder Bay, and she does lots of work with Alex Lawson and lots of work in schools and really thinking deeply about math, how students learn math, and I can tell you from ongoing conversations has a passion for helping our students, exceed their wildest dreams in their mathematical learning. So thanks, Heather, for again sharing your expertise with us and walking us down these paths today about Subitizing.
Well, yeah, thank you for having me again. I really appreciate the opportunity to put this work out there on a bigger platform so that more educators can, I think, better understand how students actually learn mathematics. So I already forwarded the screen, but here we go. We'll dig into it. But before we get going too far, I want to let everyone know who's out there in cyberspace that if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to throw them up there in the text chat. There is a chat. And I will count on Ben and Mary Lynn and Jen to keep an eye on that and let me know if there's a question in there, and we'll stop and hopefully address it right away in the moment. That's usually best. And then, of course, we usually stick around for a few minutes at the end as well in case someone has a question. You can get on and turn your mic on if you want and ask the question. That can sometimes be a little bit more challenging and maybe people are shy, but please feel free to ask the questions that you have as you have them. How's the sound? Is it okay?
Sound great here in Waldsburg.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so here we go. We're going to start, I guess, at the beginning of this journey together by talking about why I'm here even doing this work just for a moment. So as Ben said at the beginning, I work with Dr. Lawson, and she wrote this book, What to Look For. So some of you will be familiar with that book, and maybe some of you aren't. And inside that book is a continuum, a student continuum of numeracy development, which was designed to help educators understand how kids actually learn mathematics, how they construct it, how it builds. And so this comes from Dr. Lawson's 5-year longitudinal study, where we did clips of kids solving math problems twice a year over the course of 5 years, and then analyzed that data. And in this book, it's the data from grade 1 and 2. And so this image was developed through that process of that research to, again, help educators understand how kids would learn math. And when we were out presenting this work, we got a lot of questions from educators about what happens before they can add, because this image is about how it starts here with direct modeling and counting, and it's about addition. So at the beginning of this image, students can already add. And so when we were out there working with educators, we got a lot of questions about, well, what happens before kids know how to add? So so what Alex did was she went back, not to her own research, but to other researchers' work, and theoretically put, I was going to call it an addendum, but then I looked up what that means, and that would mean that it comes at the end. So this is actually like a prequel, I guess, or this goes, I don't know. It's a little attachment, a little extension that she put on here at the beginning of determining how many. And where's my mouse? So that you can see here in the yellow, this comes before, it's pre-addition, so before addition. And so we have a few things inside this yellow. And the reason why it says the word draft there is because this is not from her own research. This is from theory, from learning theory, and from other researchers. So that's why it says draft. And there are 4 boxes inside this yellow: subitizing, number sequence tagging, and coordinating. And over this session and next session, we are going to dig into those things. And we're going to start here today with subitizing. And we decided to start with subitizing because you'll notice that it kind of happens first. So it seemed like a good place to begin. So before we dig into the finer points of subitizing, we're gonna take a quick look at this image of Pete the cat. And I just want you to put in the text chat, if you have access to it there, what do you see?
Let's see, we got 2 shoes from
4
Tina,
buttons.
4 buttons, Maria, 4 buttons, Jessica, 2 eyes, Tina C, 1 tail. I feel like people know this is a math workshop.
I was just gonna say that. I was just gonna 2 ears, you guys, yeah.
Romaine,
We got
10
whiskers.
1 cool cat.
1 cool cat.
Where's the word groovy here? I keep waiting for a groovy. Axes and the 4
Yeah,
groovy buttons, right?
Ben's alluding to the fact that this picture comes from, of course, the book Pete the Cat and the 4 Groovy Buttons. So
How does that
there's
go
lots
back?
of ideas in there. And I notice, and Ben said this too, that you guys are already keyed in to the idea that you can describe this image with numbers. But you know, when you're working with young children in kindergarten or pre-kindergarten, you will know that if you asked a young child what they see in this picture, they may or may not mention number at all. They may talk about his yellow jacket or his red shoes or his orange eyes, but they might not talk about his 4 buttons or the 2 shoes or the 2 eyes. And so we start there because it's helpful for us to talk about, like, what is number anyway? So number is an attribute that a set of items can have, or an item can have. And so our children will usually come to us more often, I would think, talking about describing things with color and maybe texture or sound if it's a noise. And they might be able to describe all those with great detail and with wonderful adjectives. And for some kids, they also come to us talking about the number. But for many kids, we have to, part of our job as an educator is to draw their attention to the number aspect or the number attribute that is in front of them. We didn't have to do that for you guys, I noticed. You were already on to us. So I noticed at the beginning when we asked, you know, what is subitizing? There were, most of you who are here have some sense of subitizing for sure, but some, not everyone, and who knows for people who are watching. So I thought we would start at the beginning with a little definition of what is subitizing from Dr. Lawson's book. For those of you who have it, you can follow along. And here it is. So subitizing is the ability to know the number of objects without counting. And I don't know about you if you can think back to when you first learned about subitizing, but when I first learned about it, it kind of made sense, but it also didn't. And I wondered if, and I know that my students do because I teach pre-service teachers here at Lakehead University, they wonder if, well, you have to learn to count first, right? And then you would maybe recognize how many objects it is. And actually, that's an interesting idea, but it doesn't actually hold true. You can know the number of objects and never have learned how to count yet. And so the research certainly in psychology shows us that even young children can tell the difference between 1 and 2 objects even at 6 months of age. So, you know, they're not counting, but they can tell the distinction between 1 object and 2 objects. Dr. Lawson goes on to say that this is actually an essential strategy, one that is fundamental to the development of a strong sense of number. Which is, you know, if we've been in education for a little while, we might be thinking, okay, this is something that I didn't realize that I should be attending to and investing a little bit more time into. And so that's why we're here, to figure out how to attend to it a little bit more intentionally and invest a little bit more time. So some of the work, a lot of the ideas that we're going to be looking at here in terms of what subitizing is, comes from this research duo, Doug Clements and Julie Sarama. So those folks who want to dig into subitizing more deeply, you can look them up and you'll find lots of information. So as Ben alluded to, there are 2 different types of subitizing. We have perceptual subitizing and conceptual subitizing. And these are both, we're going to look mostly at visuals, or actually entirely tonight at visual subitizing, but you can subitize objects just by touch. You can subitize by sound and as well, but and also like a kinesthetic kind of subitizing, which those 2 researchers do go into a little bit. But for today, we're going to focus just on visual subitizing, because that's the kind that we see the most often in classrooms. So what are these 2 different types, and does it really matter to me as an educator? Because sometimes, you know, as a researcher, I can say this very fairly, I think, we sometimes get a little too fine-grained and it's not actually practical, where and we forget that in real life it doesn't matter to be that fine. But in this case, I'm going to argue that these 2 are important distinctions that we need to understand as educators.
This is recent learning for me. How about you, Jen? Did you find this valuable to be thinking about?
Definitely. And I know she's going to go more in depth, but it just put things into perspective in our classrooms and intentional lessons, and yeah, made me think more intentional.
So buckle up, here comes the thinking.
Well, I thought we might actually take a little bit of a poll here. Mary Lynn had suggested this one in some of our planning, and I thought it might come in here. So I'm just going to define perceptual subitizing for a moment and say that perceptual subitizing is, you know, being able to just look at a set of objects and know how many are there without counting, and just being able to perceive it and know the objects. And I just wonder if you want to use your drawing tool, you can just write a number on the screen here. What's the largest set of objects you think you can subitize? And I'm gonna.
You mean the number?
Yeah, the largest number of objects you think you could subitize, just to, you know, just by looking at it.
Oh, we got 20, 5.
I thought that was going to be 1 for a second.
I did too.
Like, yeah, I think you can do it. Yeah. 10, 20, 12. We'll just give it a few more seconds. What about you, Ben? How many do you think you can do?
Well, me personally, because I think it's quite low.
Let's put a 1 there.
Put a 1. I'll put a 1. I'll be the guy. You know, when I was thinking of this, I was thinking of this number a lot when I was learning this together. I was thinking a lot about the number 3, like, but I was using the dice as a lot of the conversation I was thinking about.
Yeah.
6 is what you thought, Mary Lynn? Oh.
Yeah. So that's great. Thank you for throwing those ones up there. And it's interesting to me. Yeah. So somebody used the text. Congratulations, you found one. You found one that's easier or more neat to use. If grouped, many. Yeah. So there's this idea that we can see images You know, and if they're grouped, you're absolutely right. You can subitize more objects if they're kind of grouped together than if they're just sort of scattered. And that's kind of what this perceptual subitizing idea is about. So I'm just going to clear all of those, and thank you very much for adding your 2 cents in there. And I'm just going to clear those up, and we'll continue on with the slideshow here. So according to researchers, the amount, and this is psych researchers, the number of objects that we can subitize just in one quick go without doing any kind of calculation is actually very small. So Ben, you were kind of probably, maybe you're just in the normal range, Ben.
Has never been the case.
I'm just saying it's possible. So I'm actually going to flash an image up here, kind of in the center-ish of the screen. So I'm just going to draw your attention to that area. So just be ready. And yeah, how many pips did you see on that dice? There we go. Yeah, it wasn't even up there very long. It was like half a second, and yet look at you guys go. You know how many were there without having to count. You certainly didn't have enough time to count. And so actually, according to researchers, the maximum number that we can actually subitize without doing any kind of calculation is 4. And that's kind of interesting. And maybe you want to argue with the researchers and you think it's more, but that is what they have determined through their psych research. So I'm going to back that up actually and see if I can do that again. I have another image coming up here. So if I show you this one super fast, you may be harder pressed to feel confident in that answer. And I see some different ones up there. I see 9, I see 8. I did show it twice, so that might have been a little easier, but yeah. So yeah. So that image was, lots of you are correct. It was actually 8 on that. But perhaps if you think about how you were able to determine the 8, you may feel like you saw some little collections there. Maybe you saw 2 4s or something like that that you were adding together.
So my 3 is not quite as bad, Heather.
No, your 3 is pretty much on the mark, Ben. That's pretty much it. So whenever you're doing this other kind of subitizing, this kind where you're looking at a more complex image and you're actually building sets and adding them just even really fast, even just inside your brain, you're thinking 4 4 8, you know, in the last one. It's actually called something different, and it's conceptual subitizing. That's where the 2 different types. So with perceptual, you just perceive that image, and 4 is kind of considered to be the maximum number that people will truly use perceptual subitizing for. And then this one, conceptual subitizing, is a more complex image. What we saw there, we saw the 6 with the two dice.
So Heather, I have a question, because my answer was 6.
Yeah.
And the reason it was 6 is because I think I played a lot of games as a kid, a lot of board games, and used dice all the time. And so to me, when I see, and I'm saying a dice or die, and then I can know it's 5 and I can know it's 6. Now, I'm not saying if it's not in that shape though. So is that the issue? So if it's in that shape of the what a typical die has on it, then I may not be able to recognize that it's 6 without doing a little bit of calculating. Is that?
Yeah. So we can certainly learn really, really common patterns. But there was a time where you would have used a little bit of adding to know that pattern, I think. Yeah, so this, you're talking about like this common pattern from a die.
Yes.
And so, you know, you wouldn't need a lot of time to recognize that. And are you seeing 4 and 1 though, and knowing it's 5? This is sort of where the research is, you know, the psych researchers would say, yes, you are.
Okay. To me, I feel like I've just memorized those from seeing them
Yeah.
so frequently.
I think we're so fast on it that, you know, this is where practicality for educators is maybe a little different than for psych researchers, because for them, they're using Subitizing for a different kind of purpose. So I think for us, it becomes so fast that it may not be an important distinction anymore once you know those patterns.
Right.
But it is for other ones. So here's I went too far forward. Yeah, again. Okay, we'll try it. So I think we're going to see the dice here. Yeah. And then I have another image. So this is actually similar to the other dot plate that you saw. I'm just going to flash it up for a second here, I think. There we go. And so that one, you probably were able to perceive more easily than on the original one that I put up, because I used some color to help you see the two sets of 4. And so you were able probably to be more sure that that was 2 4s and therefore 8. And so these two different types of Subitizing, it's important for us because as educators, we want to be really intentional about the numbers, the size of numbers, and that we're selecting for our students in front of us. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Okay, so now you guys saw me, you saw the preview because I jumped forward to this slide once. And now we get to head down this path. So, you know, what are some things that educators can do during Subitizing activities that are going to help their students? So I've come up with a list of 5. There's probably many more great ones, but let's take a look at these 5. And it's a good list to start with, I think. Okay, so number 1 is the prompt that you use. And this is something that I am working on getting better at. And you will see a little video later on of me working with my daughter, and she is going to Subitize in a book, and you'll see me asking how many. But instead of asking how many, a lot of the education researchers today are suggesting that we just ask a more open-ended question. What did you see, and how did you see it? Instead of really directing them towards how many, because it will give us a little bit more insight to where they're at with Subitizing, because they might only be able to perceive part of the set, and that's still something. They might not be able to say, for example, they were looking at this dot image that we were looking at with Mary Lynn. They may be able to see, if I was working with a young child, they may tell me they saw 1, 3, and 1. But they might not be able to tell me that there were 5, but that doesn't mean they don't know anything. It just means they can't quite yet put all of those pieces together. So that's number 1. So here's an example too. So I wanted to go back to the use of 5, but here's another one. This is a classic one. If I showed this dot plate to a young group of kindergarten students, you know, some of them might tell me that what they see, if I ask them, you know, what did you see? They might tell me they see a chair or a letter B or something else, or they might see 3 and 2. But I just want to leave it a little bit more open-ended. Number 2, this is one that a good friend of mine, colleague up here in Thunder Bay, Megan Jewell, has done this for years, but it's sort of newer to me. And that is to encourage her students to use your fingers to show the same number as is in the image. So, you know, if we were looking at that dot plate that we just looked at here, I might ask them, can you show me with your fingers the same number as there are dots on this plate? So that might be something that I would have my students do. And it's actually interesting that there's some brain research out there that I've been looking into. Joe Bowler talks about it, as well as Michael Sousa, that, you know, there's the place in your brain, the center in your brain that allows you to subitize or sort of enumerate quickly, is really close to the part of your brain that controls your fingers. And so we can sort of get a little bit of double bang for our buck, especially for students who are just learning to subitize and it's new to them. We can maybe get a little bit more brain activity going in that same location so that we can you know, help them to make some connections.
Heather, I was working with a little guy today, and he's just at the very beginning. School's very new to him. And we had one die and we were rolling it and then matching it with our fingers, and he was having the time of his life.
Awesome.
And yeah, so I wanted to share that with you, that it's fun.
They have a good time. I mean, you know, you can make a lot of things into games with young kids, you know. Yeah, that sounds great. And, you know, I think that kids have fun when they feel competent too, right? That there's some, if they feel like they kind of know how the game works. Another thing that I'm going to recommend, that I would recommend that you take advantage of in your subitizing practice in the classroom or wherever it is that you're practicing. For me, a lot of it was at home, is to intentionally select just right numbers or sets that will build mathematical understanding. So just right meaning that it might not be the same set of numbers for every group of students in your classroom, especially if you're working in kindergarten. You know, some students might really be at 1, 2, and 3, and other students might be able to do something more complex like that set of 8 with the 2 different colors with the conceptual subitizing. So I would work first on perceptual subitizing and making sure that they really can get 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then I would start working on those more complex sets where, you know, they actually have to do a little bit of math. They actually have to add to be able to do that plate we were looking at earlier with the 2 sets of 4. They have to be able to perceive 2 sets of 4, but then to know that it's 8, there's a little bit of math there. And not every kid in kindergarten is going to be able to do that math on the same day. So just picking the right sets for the students that you're working with. And you were talking, Jen, when we talked before about you know, having smaller groups for some of your subitizing work.
Definitely. The large group, because it's a social program, is really good for teaching them how to wait their turn and listen to others speak and that. But the real meat and potatoes is in the small group settings where you can take children kind of on the same level and really be able to see where they're at. And even the high rollers in the class that are ready for grade 6, you can also take them aside and be able to meet them at their level as well.
Yeah.
It's hard to reach everyone at the exact same time.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so number 4 is, you know, using some color and some structure and maybe some spacing of, if this is depending on what you're doing, and we're going to look at how these apply into some different activities in a few minutes, but to help support whatever the goal is or whatever level you're working at. So there's different ways to use color and maybe some structure, maybe even some space to help students subitize. So I think I put a couple. We'll take a look at some examples in a little bit about what that would maybe look like. And then this last one is one that I use, and this is one that you know, is maybe up for debate, so you guys can do a little bit of classroom research yourselves with your students who you're working with, and get back to us on this one, because Dr. Lawson and I were talking about it, and you know, she and I maybe have a difference of opinion on the use of a little bit of time or wait time. So number 5, one of the things that I do is use attentional cues. So that just means, you know, preparing them to be ready to see the image and where it's going to come to, and maybe what it's going to look like. I think I did a good job at the very first one I gave you. I told you what was going to happen and where it was going to be. And then after that, I kind of didn't do a very good job. And I bet that it was harder to see those additional images because I didn't support you to know where to look and maybe a little bit of what it was going to look like before I just did the quick image and flashed it up in front of you. So it's helpful to give them a little bit of an indicator of where to look and what it might look like. The other thing I use, and my quiet thumbs up doesn't quite look like this in the picture. They usually hold it close to their chest, but this is the best one I could find. And so, you know, holding just a quiet thumbs up, even just for a few moments to allow more kids to get in on it. Some kids will take a little bit longer to process that image, and they may have to do a little calculation, especially if it's a conceptual subitizing image, so it's more complex and they're doing a little bit of math. Then they might take a little more time to be able to get in on that.
So Heather, like I'm thinking about sometimes when we got the whole class at a carpet activity. So I'm going to just take the other side of that. So like having everyone yell out the number may not be evidence that everyone's able to subitize that, versus having them do the thinking and then show you that, you know, a quiet thumbs up versus the kind of calling out. Is that something that you're kind of making a distinction about here?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm sure there's a time for both, and speed is a little bit of an element here, right? You do want them to not be counting in their head if you can. You want them to be really perceiving, certainly on images 4 and under. This should be pretty quick, and if it's not, then that gives you some information. But I do think that if they're sort of corralling out and calling out, it might be hard to tell who isn't with you, just to be able to know and assess, you know, where the kids are at. This might be helpful. You can still figure out how long it takes them to put their thumb up to help you with the speed aspect.
Yeah, Stephanie B says in our chat, whole groups can show the fingers, so all can show how they see the number. That's a neat thing too. Like I saw that 4 and 1 that looked like a chair to me visually.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's interesting if somebody did this and gave you the 5, or somebody gave you the 4 and 1, just maybe how they saw that visually or what they were doing.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Ben, that you're bringing up, because what they will do, that they will show you on their fingers probably reflective of what they saw in the image, a 3 and a 1 or a 2 and a 2, if they're looking at that at a 4.
And Stephanie chimes in and says, then ask, can you see it differently? So if you see it 5, can you see it this way? Or if you see it this way, can you see it collectively as a 5? That's really interesting, Stephanie. Thanks.
So let's take a quick look at some activities that can generate some subitizing in the classroom. And so dot plates, this is probably, I think, one of the most common ways that I see it applied in the classroom. And so there's a little quick image with the dot plate. Here's another one that you might do. It's pretty common. So let's take a look at those 5 things as it applies to dot plates just quickly here. So you know, you're gonna maybe try asking, what do you see and how do you see it? You know, same as what Stephanie just said in the chat. Can you use your fingers to show the same number that you see on the plates? As a teacher, when you're selecting which plates you're going to use, you know, thinking about the kids who are in front of you, am I going to ask, are they ready for a conceptual image? You know, are they ready to do 4 + 1? Is that math that they have access to, or are we still working just on our perceptual subitizing numbers? You can use color and spacing, and sometimes color and spacing can narrow the focus, and sometimes it can grow flexibility. So I just want us to take a quick look over here on this side where I am I'm just trying to find can you see my mouse when I move it around like this?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. All right, then I won't bother with that. So when we look at this dot plate, just like you guys were just saying, perhaps students would say that they see 4, or they might say that they see 2 and 2, or they might be able to say both of those things. And so sometimes kids will get really stuck on 2 and 2. Every time they see 4, they see 2 and 2, or every time they see any image, they always see 2 and 2. And so if I wanted them to get a little bit more flexibility in how they thought about 4, perhaps I could try showing an image like this and say, you know, what did you see? And so then this might open up the doorway to them seeing 3 and 1 as also being a way to see 4. So, you know, you can help grow their flexibility by using color, and I've squished them a little bit to help them see that 3 together and the 4. So I've used two things to help that 3 and 1 kind of pop off the plate a bit. And then attention cues, thumbs up, and timing. That part is something that you would certainly see used with dot plates because of the whole group activity. As when we were talking, we were preparing for this, and actually, interestingly enough, a teacher candidate who I was talking to just the other day was saying that they used dot plates as an exit card. So you can just, you know, whose turn is it to go off to the carpet, and you can do a quick image. This one is a more complex conceptual subitizing image because we have these 2 sets of 4, and they have to do a little bit of math in order to do it. So you might want to pick this plate carefully, specifically for certain kids who you think you are ready for it. But you know, any of the quick image dot plates could work for an exit card so that, you know, you're ready to go wash your hands or however you want to use it. The nice thing about that is it's one-on-one, so you have a quick little assessment on that particular student with that particular number and arrangement. Another thing that you want to, I think, get into with your subitizing is some kind of a structure. So I have here a little picture of my Gnome Hotel, and I'm just going to show it to you over here. So here is my Gnome Hotel. There's the front door. I think it's upside down, but you get the idea. And inside my Gnome Hotel is a little 5-frame. So, and so the 5-frame, those are the rooms here where the gnomes can sleep. And so what we do is we play a little game where I have, you know, every morning we want to come in and check in on our Gnome Hotel and see how many gnomes stayed at our hotel last night. And so we can do a quick image with our little gnomes, and they're sleeping at our Gnome Hotel. I'm just fixing it here. Here we go. Yeah.
The anticipation's killing me.
I know. I know. How many gnomes, Ben, do you think stayed? How many do you think stayed at our hotel last night, Ben?
3. I think 3.
That was my answer.
That was mine too.
4.
I said 3.
It took me a little while. It took me a little while. So with the kids, I set it up in advance, but I wanted to show you how it looked like empty. But there it is. Quick little image. How many gnomes stayed at the hotel last night, Ben?
4, and
Yeah.
Jen was correct as usual.
Jen was correct as usual. Good to know. Good to know. Okay, and so one of the things that's really important with our subitizing and our using our 5-frame is for them to start to construct what's inside of 5. So we can certainly talk about how many rooms were empty there, as well as how many gnomes were staying there. And we can also expand it to have, you know, we are actually in an overflow situation there where we have someone sleeping in the hallway, which sometimes happens at the Gnome Hotel. And so then we can start to investigate how numbers relate to 5 that are bigger than 5. So all those combinations inside of 5, as well as how the numbers relate to 5. So that's, you can use a Gnome Hotel, or you can use a bear box. I know that's the one Alex does, or whatever. You know, I've got a few teachers who've done like gingerbread houses and things like that. Doesn't matter. Let your creativity run wild. These are basically the same kinds of things. You know, what did you see? How did you see it? Can you use your fingers to show that? That all works. Choose your appropriate numbers. There's some conceptual and perceptual subitizing happening, and then the color and some spacing can work the same as the dot plates, and the same with the attention cues and the thumbs up. We've got the games and the bingo cards. So any game that you're using, you can definitely, especially if you're using dice, there's lots of opportunity for subitizing. And then inside of what to look for, there's actually this subitizing bingo that you can play with all these different cards. So that works out well. And this, these 5 things all apply just slightly differently. For example, you can modify the dice and the board to match whatever the appropriate numbers are for your students. I often will, if I'm using dice in a dice game, I'll cover up 5 and 6 and make another 2 and 3 or 3 and 4, so that we're working in the realm that they can understand. Oops. And the same attention cues, depending on, sometimes that works if you're working in groups, sometimes that doesn't apply in a game. And then we've got using a book. So you can use a book, and instead of using it for counting, you can use it for subitizing. So you can ask the same kinds of questions and pretty much the same ideas here. You're picking numbers that are going to work and looking at the design of the book to make sure that the pictures aren't too busy and it's fairly simple. You can see here these have sort of popping out stars here that help with the subitizing.
So the book thing, Heather, can we just pause?
I'm worried about the time, Ben, but yeah, we can go back if you want.
About that, because I think, Jen, like we were chatting about how many books we do for counting, and then we can use that same book, just do it from a subitizing perspective.
Right.
I just think I just want to highlight that. We'll keep going because we have time issues.
And use those questions, right?
And use those questions, right?
Use the activities, yeah.
We have a ton of books in many of our classrooms. Some, we can always use more. But what a great way to take something that we're using now for counting and use that for a subitizing activity.
Yeah.
That was a great idea, Heather, that you had.
It wasn't mine, but thank you. I just steal it from other people. That's just how we roll. We just got a couple more things here. I've got during play, and I've got permission to show this video for you. This takes place in a kindergarten classroom, and they've been working with 5 frames. And so they kind of built a help me out with the lingo here, Jen. This is like a center. It's like a hospital center that they've got going on.
A hospital, a dramatic center?
Yeah. Yeah, you can see this little girl's in costume, but I'm just going to play the video for you because you can hear the educator questioning and just drawing their attention to the numbers inside of the situation they've got going on. But I think I have to stop sharing, and then because I made a bit of a mistake when I came on because it wasn't going to share the sound. But now I think it should. I hope. Fingers crossed, right, Rod?
This will happen. We got good things happening.
Yeah. Here's hoping. Okay. You'll let me know.
Okay, so what should we do for a chart?
Can you hear the sound?
My name is Dr.
Good job. Way to go. So how many babies are missing, Rory?
I did
2. Where are the babies? Just a minute. So where are you going to put the baby?
That's right. And now there's one more.
One more what? One more baby missing?
Just go over the stethoscope kit.
So could you hear the sound? I hope.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Was it really loud? I'm sorry.
In the classroom.
I love that because that was authentic.
It was. So, the educators there just getting just a little bit of information, what we can see, what they're doing, and, drawing their attention to a little bit of the numbers inside that situation. But the way they have those little incubators set up is identical to what the 5 framework was that they were doing in the classroom. So then that brings us to the end.
Stephanie B's, she just said like smartboard balloon pop. You can put dots and tally marks, question marks underneath. You can also make it into a matching game. Number 3 matches with 3 dots. So just another thing we had in the chat. I just want to make sure we highlighted that.
Great.
Yeah. Thanks,
Okay,
Stephanie.
thank you, Heather.
Yes.
So where can you go to learn more? Ask a colleague, of course. Connect with one of our math coaches if you're from LKDSB. You can always go to our blogspot, Ikelempo.blogspot.ca. All of our sessions are there, so this one will be on there after today. A copy of what to look for, lots of them around the LKDSB board. Don't let anyone tell you that there aren't any in your school, because we've purchased them and there's lots. I've distributed them, so there's lots of them out there. And yeah, watch the archived sessions on our blogspot.
We have, through the magic of the internet, we can provide some feedback. So we want to first say thank you. Thanks for taking time to be part of this tonight. We know you're busy. We value the work in our classrooms, and thank you for what you do each and every day to help our students become better mathematicians. We talk lots about literacy over time. So I think I'm really excited about this conversation around numeracy and early numeracy. You know, when we first saw that book, it was K-2. We assumed that kindergarten would just be included in that. So this is a really nice deep dive into some of the concepts. But we want to hear from you. How can we make this better? What worked well for you tonight? If you go to this URL, to just type this into your internet browser, tinyurl.com/Subitizing2020. We're running for office here. But also, if you would like a participation certificate, we know that some of our, we've done some feedback listening moments to know that some ECEs may want this for some professional learning credit. So what we'll do is we'll rig up a nice little digital certificate and then be able to share that with you. So I think that's super exciting. So just go there, fill out the feedback form, and there is a spot for you to put your name and your email address in if you'd like a participation certificate. But we want to hear from you. That will help us make these sessions a bit better. Remember, tinyurl.com/Subitizing2020. We're going for 4 more years. And then the, what else we got? Thanks. I've said thanks. I want to say thanks because people take time to be part of this. I want to say thanks to Jen as well. We appreciate people who participate and learn and share, as we did so freely in our chat and in our session. But Jen Gardner is just an ECE, in one of our schools, and her willingness to be part of the session and share, we appreciate that. Rod in the background, he's the man behind the curtain, making sure this thing happens right. tinyurl.com/2020, you can give us some feedback. And Mary Lynn and again, Heather. Heather puts her heart and soul into this work and thinks so deeply. So thanks for all of that work. So we're gonna have another session. Good news. This is only the first one. We got 3. It's a series. Next Wednesday, join us, same time, same channel, same space. And also connect with an instructional coach in your building. Many districts, if you work in the school environment and school-age environment, many districts have instructional coaches. Please engage with that conversation with a colleague. If you're working in your ECE environment, connect with a colleague if you're in the licensed childcare environment. I think this is just an invitation to collaborate and have this conversation. But thanks for tuning in. That does it for today. Rod's going to hit the stop button on the recording. And then I hope everyone has a great evening.